Okay, well, I think we'll make a start. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this presentation about Red Balloon, and in particular, our exciting new centre and presence in Worthing in West Sussex. My name is Rob Watson, and I am Director of Education for Red Balloon, working across all our existing centres and, of course, Red Balloon of the Air. Over the next 20-30 minutes or so, we're going to give you an introduction to our work and explain a little bit about who we help and who we support, and then bring you up to date with where we are in terms of development in Worthing. And at the end of our session, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers. And of course, if you want to make use of the chat facility to record your question as they occur to you, that will be fantastic, and we'll make sure we're looking at those at the end of the presentation. So, Red Balloon is an educational charity established some 25 years ago, and it has the aim of working with young people, typically aged between 13 and 17, who are self-excluding from school. Now, I should explain that I'm aware that amongst our audience tonight, we have a mixture of people active in the profession and parents as well. So I'll make sure that we try and give a little bit of technical detail, but also a generic introduction to our work. Red Balloon started because our founder, Carrie Herbert, and you'll see a video from Carrie a little bit later, became aware that there were a group of students who had suffered high degrees of bullying whilst at school, who had stopped going to school as a result of the trauma that they experienced. And although the perpetrators of the bullying were able to move on with their lives, the scars and the torment stayed with the victims for a long period of time, and she was very concerned. Now, over that 25-year period that we've been operating, we've begun to recognise that the same symptoms can be caused by a whole variety of different issues, and sometimes unexplained at all. But the core theme is that the students we work with have ceased to attend school, even though they want to learn, even though they want to be there. And our role is supporting them get their lives back on track, and so that they can fulfill their promise and become really active and self-fulfilled adults moving forward. There are two broad formats to our work, and you'll hear a little bit later that both of them cover the same three areas. Those three areas being our academic provision, our well-being provision, which is centered around counselling and therapy, and also our community or social reintegration provision. So those are the three areas, but we operate two formats to deliver that to the young people we work with. The first of these is in a physical centre. We call them centres, not schools, because they look nothing like schools, and we'll show you a little video that takes you inside one of our centres so you can get a real sense of what they are like and a flavour of what we're hoping to achieve in Worthing. In the centres, young people attend on a daily basis, much as they would do school, but the whole atmosphere is very different. Casual clothes, first name terms, but with some key tenets in place. For instance, a requirement that everybody has unconditional positive regard for each other, and everybody looks after the well-being of each other as well. Our second format, and Michelle's here to give you more detail about that, is Red Balloon of the Air. And Red Balloon of the Air takes those principles that we have in our centres and applies them in an online format. But we shouldn't think of Red Balloon of the Air as entirely online. We term it a blended approach, and that is because we recognise that our young people need help and support, particularly in developing skills around socialisation and being part of a community. And for that reason, having face-to-face contact remains a very big part of Red Balloon of the Air's work. And Michelle will give you a little more insight into how that's achieved. I'm going to now virtually hand over to our founder, Carrie Herbert, who unfortunately can't join us tonight, but she has prepared a video which perhaps gives you a little more of a flavour and background to why we're here and who we help. So Josh, if you could run VT.
I set up Red Balloon when I came across the problem of very ordinary children being denied education. And I know that education is the passport to a better life. And if children are denied education because they can't access it, somebody needs to step in and do something about it. What Red Balloon does, it has a combination of 3 parts: academic provision, counselling and therapy in a community. And those 3 things equal recovery. Children are eminently recoverable. They just need somebody to listen to them. They need to be able to talk about what's happened to them. They need to be able to re-engage in education, understand what's happened, make some friends and move on. The years that we had here, we developed a recovery program. That recovery program is now written down, assured. We train people in it, and therefore when children now go to a Red Balloon, they can be confident that they're going to get a recovery program that had many years of development. Education is something that you have for life, so we have to provide children with the best education we possibly can between the ages of 5 and 16. If children stop going to school at 13 because they're too frightened, somebody has to do something about it, because we have to get them back into school, or at least onto an educational track where they can achieve the necessary qualifications and the necessary skills that they need in order to go out into the world as adults to get a job. 50% of the children we have at Red Balloon have seriously thought about or have actually tried to kill themselves. The children who come up to me after they've left, and children who are at Red Balloon at the moment, who say to me, "Thank you, Carrie, without Red Balloon, I would not be here." I know that we are offering a service, and an extremely important service, to parents and teenagers who have nowhere else to go.
So that was a video from Carrie, and I've always wanted to say run VT, so I'm very pleased I got that in as well. We're based in Cambridge, where we began, but we also have centres in northwest London, in the Harrow area, if you know London, in Norwich, in Reading, and of course in Cambridge itself. And we are technically known as independent alternative providers, which means that we are independent schools that have a very niche approach to education, so we are an alternative to schools, and that's something that we want to explore in our next video. Although we are independent, across the students that we have, the vast majority, and I'm talking over 90% or so, are put with us through a commissioning process with their local authority. And typically an EHCP, or an education healthcare plan, identifies the needs of the individual and recognises that a Red Balloon centre, or sometimes Red Balloon of the Air, is the best place to meet those needs. And so we are commissioned mainly by local authorities, sometimes by schools directly, and of course, being independent, we can also accept private referrals from families. We're now, the whole point of tonight really is to talk about our new centre in West Sussex, based in Worthing. And actually, this would be a really good opportunity to introduce Rachel to you, Rachel Munday, who in many ways is the inspiration as to why we are coming to Worthing. So Rachel, if I could ask you to say a few words.
Thank you. I just want to check that everyone can hear me okay. Yeah? Okay. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm 21 and I'm from Worthing. And I know firsthand the importance of provision like this because I was lucky enough to attend a similar facility when I needed it. So During primary school, I was pretty happy. I've always loved learning, and I would go as far as to say that school felt like home to me. However, when I reached senior school, my mental health began to deteriorate. I experienced some bullying and some friendship issues, which culminated in me experiencing quite severe school anxiety. It started off missing the odd day, where sometimes I'd refuse to get out of bed. Sometimes I'd make it all the way to school and then not be able to get out of the car because of the sheer dread at facing the school day. And this gradually worsened to the point where I stopped attending altogether. I was out of school for a couple of months where I tried to teach myself with materials sent home by my school. And then at the beginning of year 10, I attempted to start a new school, thinking that this would be a fresh start. However, I had attended the same school for 12 years, so starting somewhere completely new was too overwhelming, and I lasted 8 weeks before I had to leave that school as well. The period that followed this was pretty dire. I was socially isolated. I had no friends, no school, and very little hope for the future. Fortunately, at this time, my family came across a local alternative provision centre, specifically for children with anxiety or had experienced bullying. And here I was able to get my GCSEs, make friends, and transition back to a mainstream college to do my A-levels, and then on to university. Sadly, the school that I attended closed down shortly after I left in 2016. And ever since, it's been a dream for my father and I to open a similar school for children who struggle like I did. And so when we came across the charity Red Balloon, we finally felt like this dream could become a reality. And that is what you see before you today.
Thank you, Rachel. If we could give you a virtual round of applause, I'm sure we would, but please take that as read. Rachel's story sadly isn't unique, and I know we've many families here with us tonight who will recognise the sort of experiences that Rachel have had. Currently, pre-COVID, we are aware of 64,000 students nationally of secondary school age who are being home educated. But there are many, many more students than that that are suffering the sort of anxiety that is causing them to miss school. And so, for instance, in West Sussex alone, we are aware that there are over 600 students that West Sussex are aware of who are attending school less than 50% of the time. That is a pretty grim statistic, but it is not just a West Sussex problem. It is one that is replicated nationally. And actually, we're very grateful for the open arms in which West Sussex have welcomed us in terms of working with us now for over a year to develop our plans and bring them to fruition. So, what's a centre like? Well, I've already said it's very different to being at school. And this video, I think, which unfortunately features even more of me, so I'm sorry about that, but I will give you a little bit of insight. So thank you, Josh. Many people ask us, what is it like inside a Red Balloon? Well, unfortunately, I can't show you inside Worthing today because it's still undergoing a little bit of refurbishment. But what I can tell you that it is absolutely key to our philosophy and practice that the environment we create is as close to a family home as possible. The smaller rooms of a family home mean that Red Balloon classrooms are actually geared for teaching groups of around about 4 students. Many of our students will have struggled to find themselves and to become the person they're able to be within the larger institution of a mainstream school. And it is for that reason that the environment we create
is as different as possible, but of course no less rigorous or centred around the achievements of the young person. At the heart of a Red Balloon, you'll find the kitchen and dining room. Staffed by a cook who prepares fresh vegetarian meals on a daily basis, it is where staff and students come together to informally discuss how the day is going. It is a barometer of how well our students are progressing. When they first arrive at Red Balloon, very often they're unable to join us for our shared meal times. But as they grow in confidence, it becomes a regular part of the routine and something that everybody looks forward to. We are particularly proud in our Worthing setting of the garden that comes with the property. In other Red Balloon centres, we use our garden as an additional social space, but also for activities such as growing vegetables and flowers, all part of bringing students together in shared purpose that enables them to feel part of their community. Our new centre in Red Balloon Worthing is brilliantly located for a range of facilities such as shops, the beach, cafes, all of which can be explored by our students, of course under supervision, and enable them to grow the skills that they will need in order to become part of an adult society. As well as the facilities on the doorstep, it has a fantastic transport network close to hand, including bus, rail and road. All Red Balloon centres are registered independent schools with the Department for Education. We anticipate that registration process being completed during the autumn of 2021 for our Worthing centre, so that we can open in the new year. In the meantime, Red Balloon of the Air, our online provision, is already operating in West Sussex, and so students who will benefit from our services can access them as of now.
So thank you. I hope that shows you. I mean, Rachel's own story highlights that the students that we work with very often have not really gone out of the house in some cases for periods of time measured in years. So that focus on how to behave in a social environment, how to engage with people in shops, in the street, is a really important part of our work, complementing the academic provision that we do as well. Now, you heard in that clip that we are progressing the plans to open the centre, and if we can bring those forward to open earlier than New Year, we will, of course. But as you also heard, Red Balloon of the Air is already operating in West Sussex. And I'd like to introduce Michelle Williams, head teacher of Red Balloon of the Air, to tell us a little bit more about that provision. So, Michelle.
Hey, thank you, Rob. I'm just going to share some slides with everyone, if you bear with me one moment. Okay, I hope everyone's able to see those. Rob, can you give me a thumbs up if that's... Hey, all systems a go. That's good to hear. So, like all parts of Red Balloon of the Air passionately believes that no young person should have to miss out on their education. And we share the ethos and the values of all the different parts of Red Balloon. And we have that student-centred approach at the heart of everything that we do. And Rob and Carrie in her video have already mentioned these three central areas of how we approach re-engaging and rebuilding our young people. So that's the education, the well-being and the social re-engagement. And through Red Balloon of the Air's blended approach, we try our best to replicate what young people might encounter in our physical centres. So you might wonder, what is Red Balloon of the Air? A centre is easy to understand, but of course a partly online provision takes a little bit more thinking through. So we are wholly a blended educational provider. And we help those young people who are at present unable to access a school. And sometimes we help young people who are presently unable to access a centre to make that first step. So we've got teams of teachers, therapists, and most importantly, we have local link mentors. So presently, the Worthing Physical Centre is on the way, but we are, as Rob said, active in the area, and we have 2 fully trained active link mentors based in Worthing at the moment. And those link mentors are so important because they can reach out and instigate that social contact with the young person, and they become that trusted adult who works with the child and the family in their home. We often deliver our academic provision and therapy online, again, reaching the young person before they're ready to leave their home. But we do it differently to many of the other educational providers. We have that individualised, live, in-person support there. We don't do flipped learning. We don't do recorded sessions. Students can access their learning outside of lesson time, but we think it's really important as a therapeutic educational provision to provide that real relationship building opportunities and live lessons and support. So this is a diagram that shows the approach of all of Red Balloon really, and it's something that's central to Red Balloon of the Air too. We listen to our young people, we have unconditional positive regard and respect for them. We have a very gradual approach where we negotiate the process of learning, and that might be that we deliver project-based learning for some time, or it may be that they're feeling ambitious and want to go directly to a GCSE course. But what we do is we put the needs and the wants of the student at the heart of what we do. We help them develop trust in adults once again, and we help them to take some control over the educational process, and that works so well to develop their confidence and their ability to get back into education. So, like the centres, we deal with a wide range of students, and here there are some typical student profiles, and the majority of our young people, I would say, have anxiety and depression to a greater or lesser degree. So we can support students via the blended online provision from Red Balloon of the Air, or we can provide support for young people solely at a centre, or we can provide a mixture of the two, and we can switch between those as is most appropriate for a young person at the time. I think what is a real strength of the Red Balloon approach is that we are hugely flexible and we've got student needs at the heart of what we do. So Red Balloon of the Air has a few requirements, and some are the same as the centre and some are a little bit different. So as with all elements of Red Balloon, we need the young person to want to try it, to want to make personal, social and academic progress, and to have that ability to show kindness and positive regard to others. But for Red Balloon of the Air specifically, we need a home environment that is supportive of learning in the home and an accessible adult for safeguarding purposes. Young people for Red Balloon of the Air will need a reading age of 10 plus to be able to confidently access online learning and therapy, and of course a Wi-Fi connection. We actually supply all other equipment. So to expand a little bit on what you saw earlier, we provide child-centred learning, and that's something that all of Red Balloon does in the centres too. Red Balloon of the Air is live and supported online learning. We don't present young people with material and hope they can manage that on their own, especially when they've been out of education for quite some time. It's not always a realistic expectation. So we work with graduated exposure to the social and the academic and the therapeutic elements. We build on those at the pace a student can manage. Because they're not meeting their teachers in person, at RBO, it's so important for us to have that link mentor who becomes that trusted adult working in the home. And that link mentor helps the young person to eventually be able to leave the home, to enter one of our centres, and eventually to move on back into the wider world. The majority of our young people go on to sixth form or a local college. So we have a highly qualified professional team supporting in the background, even though they're not always visible through the medium of the laptop. So here's some additional information and how to get in touch with us. And we'll be sharing these slides with you after the presentation ends. And we've also included a video, which I think you've already sat through 2 already. So you can watch that whenever you have a moment. And thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, it is a fantastic opportunity, and we're so grateful to the Monday family for supporting us in terms of our Worthing Centre. You'll see from Michelle's contribution that Red Balloon of the Air actually can work with some of our most challenging young people who perhaps couldn't even make it into a centre without support. And the beauty of Worthing is that it is set up right from the start to work in very close collaboration, as both being a centre in its own right once we get the necessary permissions, but also a hub for Red Balloon of the Air's work in West Sussex. There are over 43,000 secondary school students in West Sussex, that's aged 11 to 16. And across West Sussex and Brighton and Hove, there are 120 secondary schools. Our analysis suggests that on average, each of those schools would have one person that would really benefit from work with Red Balloon. So you can see that's 120 students. Far more, frankly, than we would be able to cope with at this stage in any event. The beauty of Worthing and our location in Windsor Road, if you know it, is that it is accessible to that sort of coastline conurbation that extends across West Sussex, Brighton and Hove, and even into East Sussex as well, making journey times a real feasible option for access. In terms of our outcomes, well, we're really proud of them. Over 90% of our students make that transition into a mainstream 16+ secondary. So typically an FE college or a sixth form centre, occasionally a work-related training route, but for all young people, that's a pretty rare option at 16 now. So most of our students, 90% of them, will be accessing further study, but in a mainstream setting, because they have the confidence to make that successful. They may not always be the most gregarious young adults in those settings, but they can cope, and actually that is such an important achievement for them. We regularly survey our young people, and so we can tell you that in the summer, 84% of our students said that they had noticed a significant improvement in their own well-being and motivation. And when you consider that was the period that included the most dramatic and drastic forms of lockdown and COVID issues, we think that that's pretty impressive. And in terms of academics, actually in the summer, 86% of students across Red Balloon, and I think Michelle would want me to say slightly more at Red Balloon of the Air, gained English and Maths GCSEs, as well as a range of other conversations. So that's conversations, what am I saying? Qualifications. So that's really an introduction to who we are. And I would like to open it out to questions. I see we do have a question in the chat room, and the question is, how do you get a referral from either the local authority or the school if there isn't an educational healthcare plan in place? And the answer is that would be a real challenge. Now, some local authorities are actively looking at ways. Well, let me just give a background, particularly for parents who may not have been used to the system. Schools, state schools, are expected to be able to support the needs of students at an individual level, and where those students exhibit issues around health, mental health, or other learning difficulty, the first stage is for schools to put in interventions to support them further. The next stage, if that isn't proving effective, is to work with the local authority and parents and the student to put in place an educational healthcare plan. If you're a few years behind from when you were at school, they used to be called statements, but the educational healthcare plan is a much wider beast because it does look at health issues as well as educational issues. Educational healthcare plans are a gateway to accessing a very limited and overstretched pot of money within the local authority. And typically, it is because that gateway is in place that local authorities are able to look outside their existing school provision at alternative providers such as Red Balloon. Some local authorities are quite keen to explore ways in which they can passport that money without an educational healthcare plan, because they fear, well, partly fear it stigmatizes unnecessarily an individual person, but bluntly, sometimes they can see the writings on the wall, and the EHCP is only going to confirm what everybody knows, and a whole lot of money can be saved by just cutting to the chase effectively. I would be blunt and say we don't know what West Sussex thoughts are around that at the moment. We've had some conversations with them that both recognise the importance of EHCPs and actually are quite keen on the fact that we don't insist on an EHCP. I suppose you could say we just insist that the funding's there to make sure that the support is in place. So that I would have to say that working with your school to look through the process of an EHCP is going to be the most secure route. And even if Red Balloon isn't the best place for the individual student, that is the way of securing additional resource to actually support the needs of that young person. Looking through, how well is Red Balloon suited? I haven't got my glasses on and I'm told to stand away from the computer, so excuse me for a moment as I lean in. How well suited is Red Balloon to children on the autistic spectrum? I'll ask Michelle to answer that, if I may. Michelle?
I think it's very well suited. At Red Balloon of the Air, we've got probably around 1/3 of our students, and probably more actually, who are recognised as having an autistic spectrum condition. However, I would say alongside that, we have a lot of young people who haven't got a formal diagnosis, but are certainly displaying traits that you would say are typical of being on the autistic spectrum. I think Red Balloon of the Air works particularly well because the young person can start to learn in a very, very safe environment. A lot of the young people are very confident with technology and can develop their social skills at a very slow, measured and considered pace. So I would say Red Balloon of the Air is particularly suited, but Red Balloon centres are also certainly able to support young people with autism due to their very, very small class sizes, potentially only 3 or 4, that can be a very safe space for young people again.
Thank you, Michelle. We've had a couple of questions around private students, and I think I did mention it earlier, but just to restate, as well as, as I said, over 90% of our students do come via a local authority or state school extending their provision with us, we are able as an independent school to take private referrals as well from families. And there's a question here about the fees that we charge for those independent students. And I think it's fair to say, if you are used to paying out for independent education, we probably look like very good value. If you're not used to paying out for independent education, it's going to seem like a very large amount. And I also, before I actually talk about the fees themselves, should point out that each student is regarded as a complete individual, and the needs of that student are assessed by our teams within Red Balloon to make sure the package absolutely meets them. So I can give you some minimum fees, and I'm about to do that, but I would want you to bear in mind that depending on the needs of the individual, those fees are a starting point. And for us, it is most important to make sure that what we're providing is really going to match the needs of the individual. So for Red Balloon of the Air, the minimum starting point is going to be around 12,500. I say going to be, it is around about 12,500. To give you a range, there are students who easily exceed double that in terms of a fee because they are on very bespoke packages that support their needs. Within a centre, the starting point is around about 22,000 per annum, both figures per annum. But again, there are some students across all centres whose fees will be considerably higher than that, because that represents the needs of those students. I'm just looking through the centre.
So would it be okay to just chip in? I'm aware we've got a few parents here at the moment, and I would advise parents to not take their young person off a school role and do your best to work with the system via the school, because once you take your young person out of that, they are considered electively home educated, and you're going to find that it is a struggle to access any local authority support in a way that the school might have access to.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Michelle, with your experience, the question here about payment plans, how do private people organise payment? Is it monthly, termly?
So, well, you know, we really want to support our young people as best we can, and I know that we have some families who have half-termly and termly payment plans with Red Balloon of the Air.
And I should also say that there is a, frankly limited, but it is their bursary scheme to support families who otherwise wouldn't be able to meet the fees, but whose only alternative is a private place. Typically, the bursary will cover up to 50% of the fees, and obviously there will be account taken of the circumstances of the family and why bursary support is needed. I'm just looking through. I'm going to lean forward again. Sorry about this. Right, age range of our students. Well, our centres, because I think this is particularly around centres, they are eligible to take students between 11 and typically 17, occasionally 18. The way it tends to work, however, and actually you heard a little bit about this in Rachel's, when Rachel was speaking, students or young people tend to do pretty well in primary school. The nature of a primary school with its wraparound support and very few adults for whom close attachments are built tends to work well for students. when they go to secondary school, and no fault of secondary schools, I'm an ex-secondary school head teacher myself, so I do know what it's like, but that's when our students tend to start exhibiting signs that they really are not coping. And it can be simple things like not making a suitable friends in year 7 right at the start, and then finding that they're in too big an environment, too many adults, don't know who to turn to get the level of support they used to get them over hurdles in primary school. Now, as I explained before, secondary schools are duty bound to work with young people to make sure that they are doing everything to support that place. That will take time. And we notice time and time again, and I know colleagues in secondary schools recognise this, that typically year 7 and year 8 is about trying a range of different strategies to help maintain that place. And we would all agree, Red Balloon colleagues as well as mainstream school colleagues, that the ideal place for a person to experience education is within a school setting, and getting to understand how life works through that experience. So it's not that schools are necessarily reluctant, if you like, to say we need a different form of education here. It is because they are trying lots of different avenues. And I will also say that our experience will be that for 90% of those young people, at some point, those interventions will work and we will never get to see them. By the time we get to year 9, where those interventions haven't worked, that's when the issues are starting to step up and get more serious. You've got someone who is becoming more mature, having greater thoughts and ideas about their own identity and how comfortable they feel, and less willing perhaps to be encouraged, cajoled, or even forced in some cases into a school setting. And that's when we will see the majority of our referrals. It's in probably the second half of year 9, moving into the very early part of year 10. So most of our students are joining on the sort of cusp of 13 to 14, that sort of territory. And that means that we feel that we have key stage 4 effectively. Obviously, we're not wasting time if they join us a little bit earlier, but our aim is that they are ready to go back into a mainstream setting at 16 plus. As an ex-head teacher, I can tell you no head teacher wants someone joining them who's been out of mainstream in year 11, because they won't be able to catch up. So it's actually better that we make a really good job of supporting their reintegration at 16 plus. And as I said, 90% of our students are like that. Right. I do appreciate that some of our parents here are in a really difficult situation. For instance, parents who know that their daughter's mental health issues are deteriorating, becoming more extreme, and they have not been able to secure an EHCP. You've already heard Michelle give the very strong advice that please don't remove the young person from their education setting, because that tends to make you invisible to the local authority. Please, it can be very trying, but you need to keep working with the school and GPs as well, and assemble as much evidence as you can that intervention is required, and that it's probably at a level that will only be supported by an EHCP. That will probably involve some form of assessment from a child psychologist. It is a long route, and I'm afraid it does require perseverance if you're finding yourself in a school that initially feels that they have things in control. A final part on the age thing. There is a program that Red Balloon of the Air have that supports older students, we don't offer, let's be clear from the start, the sort of A-level routes that 16 plus students are often embarked on, or level 3 qualifications. But for some students, their referral to Red Balloon is either later, or for a whole variety of reasons, they're not quite ready to move on from us. Can you talk a little bit about that, Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely. So Red Balloon of the Air sometimes supports young people who've managed to not attend throughout the entire GCSE process. So sometimes we get people come to us at the beginning of year 12 who haven't yet done their GCSEs and need the right kind of therapeutic educational setting and the support around that in order to go through the exam years. So that's one reason we get the older teenagers with us. But also, as Rob said, we have a programme called Step Forward, and that's specifically to support the needs of young people who've finished a Key Stage 4 level education but aren't yet ready to move on to anything in further education. So it's a bridging programme, I suppose, helping young people to move on from a school setting into further education, training, or the world of work.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that has covered the questions that have dropped into the chat box. If there's anyone waiting for a question, please let us know. You'll notice that you will shortly get the slides that Michelle produced, and there are contact details for us on those slides. So if there's something you think of later, or something that we've somehow missed, probably because I'm so short-sighted without my glasses and too vain to wear them, then we will pick those up. Can I draw our meeting to a close, and thank you very much for giving up a portion of your evening to listen to us. Hope you found it useful, and you'll follow our progress in local news and on social media, and come and meet us, and we really look forward to meeting you in our new home in Worthing. Thank you, everyone.